Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wildwood94. I hope you're doing well today. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm going to celebrate with my beautiful wife. It's our first anniversary, not our anniversary, our first Valentine's Day since being married last year in 2020 in the year of hell, mind you. Anyway, today, let me try this again. Today, my book review is going to be for D.O.A. Extreme Horror Collection. I had a blast with this. It also has the word Anthology on the Kindle book title, so it'll be like Extreme Horror Collection Anthology. Anyway, this is edited together, by the way, I love that cover, by David C. Hayes and Jack Burton. And it came out around 2011 according to the copyright. I'm gonna tell you, man, I love some extreme horror. If you're a fan of splatterpunk, like we're talking Brian Keene, Jonathan Mayberry, if you're a fan of people like that, you will find some fascination in this. I think there's an absolutely horrific amount of material in here that will just terrify you. It's again, splatterpunk. If you don't know what that is, it's a mixture of blood, plenty of cursing. It could have pedophilia in there, which is not a good thing, so it's not treated as a good thing. It's horrific and evil. Makes you cringe. A lot of the stories in here make you cringe in the right way that you want to because you read horror for that very reason. There are stories in here that don't even involve any of those things. They're just plain creepy and scary. I loved this book. I would hands down say, easily, without question, I don't read many short story collections, especially when they involve many different authors for each story that comes out. I don't typically read horror story collections when there are multiple authors because they're usually terrible. They usually are, from my experience in the past, and even people like Stephen King can put out a terrible short story collection. You look at Nightmares and Dreamscapes, there's like nothing in there that I like. I might review that someday if I ever reread it, but honest to God, I'd rather wait like 5 years to reread that because it was terrible. This is a really awful book with like 2 or 3 good stories in the entire book. But anyway, not to just trash King, because I love King for the most part. There's a lot of authors in here. The book overall is about, what is it? Come on, Kindle. 232 pages or so. I really like it a lot. I think this is just phenomenal. It's easily the hands-down best scary story collection I've ever read in my life, because they can have a mixture of like some fantasy stuff in here. I don't think there was anything sci-fi. I think there's like gentle fantasy, like somebody falls asleep and they go into like another world type of thing. Most of this is gory, horrific trash fest in the best possible way. Not trash as in throw this in the garbage trash. It's more like this is what most people would consider trash reading, but it's great and I loved it and I had a blast with it. Now I will tell you, I have never in my life seen such creativity out of a group of writers until I read this. And surprisingly, I haven't heard of any of these people, ever. I've never heard of any of these people in my life, whatsoever, to my knowledge. I will tell you this, some of my favorite scary stories I've ever read in my life, with some of the best twists I've ever read in my life, are in this book. I will recommend this up one side and down the other the rest of my life. If you have not read this, you're missing out. I own the second and third books, and I cannot wait to read those. They're going to be great. I'm so stoked about them. Anyway, I'll read you the different authors' names. There's a lot of them here, so bear with me on this. I don't mean to take up the whole review with this, but yeah, I think it's worth telling all of their names because I think pretty much every story in here was phenomenal. There was only one that I was kind of wish-washy about, but I'll explain that in a little while. Stacy Boley, Yuri Gray, Quinn Hernandez, Adrian Ludens, John McNee, A.R. Braun, Robert Essig, Callie Voorhees, it's not spelled like Jason's name, Kenneth Yu, Glenn Barras, I don't know, C.M. Saunders, James L. Grant, Matthew Cavill, J.W. Schnar, I don't know, Tanya Brown, Craig Saunders, Forrest Engel, R. Warren Smith, Chris Reed, Alex Sizak, Eric Dimbleby, Michael Kislik, Shane McKenzie, Piper Morgan, Atris Ray, Chad McKee, Michael Bracken, Edward R. Rosick. Those are all the people. That's a weird way of saying that. That was a lot of people's names. Now I'll tell you straightforward. I'm going to go to my personal favorite story in here. Michael Kislik, or Cislik, I don't know how you say his name. He wrote my favorite story in the whole book. It's called Digital Media. And I'll give you a general premise of what that's about without spoiling anything. Of course, my spoiler reviews are always spoiler-free. Wait, let me try that again. My reviews are spoiler-free. That's what I wanted to say. Digital Media by Michael Kislik is just phenomenal. It's hands down my favorite story in here. As pretty much I loved every single book or story in this collection. I would say that this is hands down the best in here. You want something horrific and gory and an amazing twist in it, this is the one to go for. So, there's a guy who wakes up tied up to a chair in the middle of a room. You ever seen a film where they have kind of an interrogation scene, and like it's kind of like in Dark Knight, for example, when Joker's being held captive in the police station. He's in that one room, and Batman's apparently been standing behind him in the dark the whole time. You had that one light at the desk lamp on the table in that very dark room with the mirrors and stuff on the walls. And when that light is out in there and you just have that lamp on, it's just that one spot of the room that has a light at all. It's kind of a room like that. And our particular protagonist in the story is sitting in the dark. A light's facing on him, but outside there's nothing but shadows. He can't really see anything out there at all. But apparently he has to play a game of 20 questions. There might be more questions than 20, but still, he's playing like a game of 20 questions. And it turns out every time that he gets something wrong, a knife will come out of nowhere from somebody else's hand that he can't see in the dark and will cut him. And at some point, the 20 questions things turns into losing fingers. And it is brutal. It's a brutal, brutal story. Really brutal. Of course, the 20 questions, there are not 20 fingers on your hands, it also involves toes, but it gets more horrific as that goes along, the kind of stuff you find out that's happening here, the circumstances here. This guy doesn't really know why he's stuck in this situation. It's absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific being in a situation like that where you can't control anything. You even slightly get a question wrong, or they think you're lying, they're going to take a finger of yours or something. It's brutal, and it's phenomenal in tension. I'll tell you that too. One of my favorite things that I don't really get affected by in books usually is tension. And when you can do that well and maintain it well is the big thing. Maintain it, you're pulling it off, and I will recommend the crap out of your book. Or short story, for that matter. This is a great example of a collection that pretty much every story in here either builds and builds and builds into a fantastic tension that works so well. When all of these stories are pretty much 5 to 10 pages long, maybe 12 at the highest, they're not super long stories. But these are great. They all do so well. Every writer in here did a great, great, great job. There's also a story in here too, which is kind of the one I was mentioning earlier that I'm a little wish-washy on. I still don't know how I feel about it. In one respect, my Christian brain wants to be offended because it was like mocking Jesus. You know, it was kind of like completely mischaracterizing Jesus in a deliberate way. But I'm reading Splatterpunk on the other hand. And they deliberately go out of their way to be offensive. And that's kind of the thing with Splatterpunk. There's pedophilia in here. There's molestation and rape and all kinds of horrific stuff in here. Because we know it's evil. Because we know God condemns it. And we know that to read about these things are horrific. And of course, Splatterpunk, unlike most horror writing that you get out there from normies, it's not going to be without detail here. It's going to be very deep. Very, very deeply detailed. And if that gets to you more than usual when you read books, like if you read Stephen King, you get really put off by any gore that might or might not be in there, or you're the type who won't read Stephen King because you heard he's a horror writer, you're afraid of gore and stuff, I get it, but this is not going to be for you. It's not going to be for you, but I will tell you right now, if you read this, you better be prepared, because there's going to be some stuff in here that's going to make you want to vomit. There's another story I loved in here also, which, by the way, that one about the Jesus blasphemy stuff, the story was horrific. The ending of it was truly horrific. I thought it was a really great way to end that story. As heretical as it was, I really liked it. In the essence of the way the ending was. If the ending hadn't been as good as it was, I don't think I would have had any kind of interest in that story. But overall, even that story was well written for the most part for what it was doing. I get it was deliberately trying to be offensive, but still. Another story in here that I really liked a lot, as disgusting as it is, and if you've read the book or you know the story at all, you know what I'm talking about. I don't remember the title of it, but there was a particular story in here. It was about a guy who's kind of like a pimp type of thing. Not really a pimp, but he's just a player on the side of the road. Anyway, he's like a gangster type, and he sees this beautiful, beautiful woman with a huge butt and huge boobs running down the street, and he kind of stops her and tries to talk her into letting him either go home with her or get her to come back to his house. And she talks about bringing her sisters with her. And he immediately thinks it's going to be, that kind of situation. So he's all excited about that, and that situation does not turn out well for him. It is horrific. It is probably one of the most gross and nasty things I've ever read in my life. I mean, truly, it may very well be one of the most disgusting stories I've ever read in my life. I would love to see somebody like Stephen King react to this, It is the most horrific story I've ever read in my life. I wanted to puke reading that story. And that's one of the reasons I can kind of remember it so well, but also just the gruesomeness of the story is just unbelievable. other than that, I don't want to tell you too much, guys. I want you to be able to come to this book and experience everything for the first time. But those are the big stories that stuck out to me in here. But every story in here brought something great in here. There was one story about I think it was a stepdad that was molesting his stepdaughter. And he had like a key or something where he was able to like unlock her brain in the middle of the night and go into her like mind. This was kind of a fantasy type story. And he would like attack her every single night in her dreams. He would deliberately do it because he liked to get off on that type of thing. These are genius stories and the creativity that they have. And again, they're brutal, but they have a lot of creativity in here that really kind of makes it not just shock value stuff. But it is kind of shock value stuff for a lot of them. There are some of them that are kind of more amateur written. I know Brian Keene gets a lot of accusation over this too. I don't think it's fair. I think if the story works, I think if the story's well told, it's all that really matters to me. This is great. Pretty much every story in here is well written for the most part. It may have amateur moments here and there in the writing style, but still, I really love it. I think that, as shocking as it is, D.O.A. Extreme Horror Collection Anthology is one of the most shocking books I've ever read. It's one of the most recommendable horror books I could ever give you for like more extreme, gory, puke-inducing, all kinds of splatterpunk type stuff. If you love that kind of thing, this book will be for you and you will love it. I promise you. Again, as a Christian man myself, a lot of these were horrifying. I mean, they were hard to get through. And not in the sense of reading them. They were well written. It's just the content that would harm my brain. It has not left my brain since I read this book months ago. Anyway, D.O.A. Extreme Horror Collection Anthology. What did you think about it? Put your thoughts and comments down below if you've read this book. I would love to hear what you have to say about it. Have you ever heard of this book? Do you want to read it based on my recommendation of it? I highly recommend this to the right audience because it is one of the best splatterpunk books I've ever read in my life. I loved this. Absolutely. It's great. If I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, you probably already know what I'm going to say. It's easily a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I loved this. I had my questions about some of the stories, but they eventually turned into great stories by the end of the story. And again, being like 10 to 15 pages a piece is not bad at all for about a 250-page book or so. This flies by. I mean, it flies by. I read this book in about a week back when I read it, and I don't read books that fast. When it comes to something like this, I'm trying to take in every single detail of these stories because they're kind of more fun. It's one of the reasons I read Brian Keene. I like that kind of basic writing style that he has, but it also works extremely well for his kind of stories and the way he tells his kinds of stories. I'm a huge Brian Keene fan, probably one of my favorite writers of all time. Love his work. I wish that he was in here. I'm a little surprised he's not. Maybe he'll be in the second or third books, because there are 3 of these, if I haven't mentioned that yet. But I can't wait to read more of those. I've already started the second book. I've read like 1 story so far. It's great. Really enjoying that so far. I haven't finished that first story, so maybe it goes bad. I don't know, but we'll see. Anyway, what did you think about it? Are you going to read it? Put your thoughts and comments down below. 5 out of 5 stars for me. I had a blast reading this. I could talk about this book all day long with people. I'm serious. Just the shock value is unbelievable. Not that I read books just for shock value, but this will be easily rereadable because of the kind of content that's in here and how creative. Again, that's the big thing here. Why don't I just consider this shock value like a Family Guy type of thing? The creativity behind these stories is plumb genius. You know, you can go to a book, and sometimes you have people out there that when you describe a book to them and tell them it's extremely gory, extremely vomit-inducing, that kind of thing, or it has rape in the story, a lot of people are immediately like, I'm not reading that. That sounds gross. No, I'm telling you, there's a lot more merit here with the creativity of it. Just check it out. I promise you, you'll love it. It's so good. Anyway, put your thoughts and comments down below once again. Thank you for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today. Have a happy Valentine's Day, and goodbye.